Hey friends, welcome back to TalkMate English. I'm Adam, and I'm really happy you're here today. If you want to speak English more naturally in your daily life, today's lesson is going to help you a lot. Many English learners know grammar and vocabulary, but when it's time to actually speak in real conversations, they sometimes feel stuck. They might know the words, but they don't know the natural phrases people really use every day. In this lesson, we're going to explore many simple and powerful English phrases that people use in normal daily conversations. These are phrases you can use at home, with friends, at work, at school, in stores, on the phone, and in many other everyday situations. As we go through the lesson together, I will also give you practice moments so you can repeat the phrases, imagine real-life situations, and start building confidence in your English speaking. Try to listen carefully, repeat the sentences after me, and imagine yourself actually using them in real life. Let's begin with a very common phrase people use when they meet someone or start a conversation. The phrase is, "How's it going?" This phrase is extremely common in everyday English, especially in friendly and casual conversations. Instead of saying the more formal, "How are you?" people often say, "How's it going?" It simply means the same thing. When someone asks you, "How's it going?" they are asking how you are doing, or how your day is going. You can answer in many simple ways. For example, you might say, "It's going well, thanks," or "Pretty good," or even "Not bad." Let's practice a short situation. Imagine you see your friend in the morning. Your friend says, "Hey, Adam. Oh, how's it going?" You can answer, "It's going well, thanks. How about you?" Now try to repeat that answer out loud. "It's going well, thanks. How about you?" Speaking out loud is one of the best ways to train your brain to speak English naturally. Another phrase people often use in daily life is, "What's going on?" This phrase is similar to asking what is happening right now. It can also be used to ask if something unusual is happening. For example, imagine you walk into a room and people are talking loudly. You might say, "Hey, what's going on?" It can also simply be a friendly greeting. For example, someone might say, "Hey, Adam, what's going on?" And you can answer, "Not much, just working today." Let's practice a short response together. Imagine someone asks you, "What's going on?" You could say, "Not much. Just relaxing at home." Try repeating that sentence slowly. "Not much, just relaxing at home." Good. Now imagine another situation. Someone asks you the same question, and you answer, "Not much, just finishing some work." These small variations help you become more flexible in English conversation. Another extremely useful phrase in daily life is, "Give me a second." People say this when they need a short moment to finish something. For example, imagine someone asks you a question while you are busy looking for something in your bag. You might say, "Give me a second." It means you need a very short time. In real-life conversations, people often say this very quickly. Let's imagine a small scenario. Your friend asks you, "Adam, can you help me with something?" And you answer, "Sure, just give me a second." Now repeat that answer after me. Sure, just give me a second. This phrase is very helpful in everyday conversations because it sounds natural and polite. Another phrase you will hear very often is, "I'm on my way." People use this phrase when they are going somewhere and want to say they are already coming. For example, imagine your friend calls you and asks, "Where are you?" You can answer, "I'm on my way." It means you have already started traveling to that place. Let's imagine another situation. Your coworker sends you a message asking if you are coming to the meeting. You reply, "Yes, I'm on my way." Try repeating this phrase slowly. I'm on my way. Now say it again as if you are speaking naturally in a conversation. I'm on my way. Practicing like this helps your pronunciation and confidence. And another phrase that is extremely common in English is, "That makes sense." People use this phrase when they understand something and agree that it is logical or reasonable. For example, imagine someone explains why they were late. They say there was heavy traffic. You might respond by saying, "That makes sense." It shows that you understand their situation. Let's imagine a small conversation. Someone says, "I woke up late, so I missed the bus." You answer, "Ah, that makes sense." Now try repeating that sentence. "Ah, that makes sense." Good. Now imagine someone explains a plan for the weekend and you say, "That makes sense. It sounds like a good plan." Another helpful phrase in daily conversation is, "I'll think about it." People use this when they are not ready to give an answer yet. Maybe someone asks you to join an event. I try a new activity or make a decision. Instead of saying yes or no immediately, you can say, "I'll think about it." Let's imagine someone asks you, "Do you want to join us for dinner tonight?" You might answer, "I'm not sure yet. I'll think about it." Repeat that response with me. I'm not sure yet. I'll think about it. This phrase is very useful because it sounds polite and thoughtful. Now let's practice a short conversation using some of the phrases we already learned. Imagine you meet your friend outside a cafe. Your friend says, "Hey Adam, how's it going?" You answer, "Pretty good, thanks. How about you?" Your friend says, "Not bad. What's going on today?" You reply, "Not much. Just meeting a friend later." Your friend asks, "Do you want to grab coffee now?" You answer, I'm not sure. I'll think about it." Now pause for a moment and try to imagine yourself speaking this conversation in real life. Practicing situations like this helps your brain connect English with real daily life. Let's continue with another useful phrase. No worries. This phrase is extremely common in friendly conversations. People use it to say that something is not a problem. For example, if someone apologizes, you can answer, "No worries." Imagine your friend says, "Sorry, I'm late." You respond, "No worries." It means you are not upset. Repeat that phrase with me. No worries. Now imagine another situation. Someone thanks you for helping them. You might respond by saying, "No worries. Happy to help." Another phrase that sounds very natural in English conversations is, "Sounds good." People say this when they agree with a suggestion or plan. For example, someone says, "Let's meet at 6 p.m. You answer, "Sounds good." It means you agree. Let's practice. Imagine someone says, "Let's watch a movie tonight." You answer, "Sounds good." Repeat the phrase slowly. Sounds good. This short phrase is extremely useful and very common in everyday communication. Another phrase people often use is, "I didn't catch that." This phrase is helpful when you didn't hear something clearly. Instead of saying, "What?" which can sound a little rude, you can say, "I didn't catch that." For example, imagine someone speaks very quickly and you miss part of what they said. You can politely say, "Sorry, I didn't catch that." Try repeating that sentence. "Sorry, I didn't catch that." This phrase helps you keep the conversation polite and natural. Now let's practice a short listening and speaking exercise together. Imagine you are talking to a co-worker. The co-worker says, "Let's finish this project tomorrow morning." You answer, "Sounds good." Then the co-worker says something quietly and you don't hear it clearly. You respond, "Sorry, I didn't catch that." Practicing small interactions like this helps you prepare for real-life English conversations. Another phrase that is very common is, "That's a good point." People say this when they recognize that someone has said something intelligent or important. For example, imagine someone says, "Maybe we should leave earlier because traffic might be heavy." You could respond, "That's a good point. Repeat this phrase with me. That's a good point." This phrase helps you sound thoughtful and engaged in conversation. Another daily phrase you can use is, "I'll get back to you." People use this phrase when they cannot answer something immediately but promise to respond later. For example, imagine someone asks you a question about a schedule. You might say, "I'll check and get back to you." Let's repeat that sentence together. "I'll check and get back to you." This phrase is very common in both work and personal conversations. Let's imagine another practice situation together. Your friend asks, "Can you help me move this weekend?" You respond, "I'm not sure about my schedule. I'll get back to you." Now try repeating that response out loud. "I'm not sure about my schedule. I'll get back to you." Practicing these realistic responses helps your brain become comfortable using English naturally. Before we continue with more useful phrases, take a moment to repeat some of the phrases we practiced today. Try saying them slowly and clearly. "How's it going?" "What's going on?" "Give me a second." "I'm on my way." "That makes sense. I'll think about it." "No worries." "Sounds good." "I didn't catch that." "That's a good point." "I'll get back to you." Repeating phrases like this helps your brain remember them more easily and prepares you to use them in real conversations. Now imagine your daily life tomorrow. Maybe you talk to a friend, a coworker, a classmate, or someone in a store. Try to imagine using at least one of these phrases naturally in that conversation. The more you imagine and practice using English in real-life situations, the faster your speaking confidence will grow. And another phrase that people use very often in daily conversations is, "It depends." This phrase is useful when the answer to a question is not simply yes or no. Sometimes the answer changes based on the situation. When that happens, people say, "It depends." For example, imagine someone asks you, "Do you like working at night?" You might answer, "It depends. Sometimes I like it, but sometimes I prefer working in the morning." Now, try repeating that sentence slowly. "It depends." Good. Now imagine another situation. A friend asks you, "Do you want to travel this summer?" You might answer, "It depends on my schedule." Repeat that sentence with me. "It depends on my schedule." This phrase helps you sound thoughtful and flexible in conversations. Another very useful phrase for everyday life is, "I see what you mean." People use this phrase when they understand another person's opinion or explanation. It does not always mean you fully agree, but it shows that you understand their perspective. For example, imagine someone explains why they prefer working from home instead of going to the office. After listening, you might say, "I see what you mean." Let's practice that phrase together. "I see what you mean." Now imagine another small conversation. A friend says, Studying early in the morning helps me focus better. You respond, I see what you mean. Mornings can be very peaceful. Practicing responses like this helps your conversations sound more natural and friendly. And another phrase that appears very often in daily conversations is, to be honest. People use this phrase when they want to say something very truthful or express their real feelings. For example, imagine someone asks you if you liked a movie. You might answer, to be honest, I didn't enjoy it very much. This phrase prepares the listener for a sincere answer. Let's practice a simple example. Someone asks you, did you like the restaurant? You reply, to be honest, the food was okay, but not amazing. Repeat that sentence slowly. To be honest, the food was okay, but not amazing. Using this phrase helps you communicate your thoughts clearly and politely. Another helpful phrase you can use in conversations is, that's interesting. This phrase is useful when someone tells you something new or surprising. And even if you don't have a long response, saying, that's interesting, keeps the conversation friendly. For example, imagine someone tells you about a new hobby they started. You might respond, that's interesting. How did you get started? Try repeating the phrase. That's interesting. Now imagine another situation. Someone says, I recently started learning how to cook Italian food. You answer, that's interesting. What dishes have you tried? This phrase helps you continue conversations naturally. Now let's pause for a short practice moment. Imagine you are talking with a friend at a cafe. Your friend says, I'm thinking about moving to another city next year. You respond, that's interesting. Why are you thinking about moving? Your friend explains that there are more job opportunities there. You answer, I see what you mean. That could be a good opportunity. Now try repeating these sentences slowly in your own voice. Practicing small conversations like this trains your mind to think in English. Another phrase that is extremely useful in daily conversations is, I'm just kidding. People use this phrase when they say something as a joke and want to make sure the other person understands it is not serious. For example, imagine you jokingly tell your friend, you owe me $100. Then you smile and say, I'm just kidding. Let's repeat that phrase together. I'm just kidding. Humor is an important part of communication, and this phrase helps avoid misunderstandings. Another phrase people use often is, that works for me. This phrase means that a suggestion or plan is acceptable to you. For example, imagine someone says, let's meet at the park at 5 p.m. You might answer, that works for me. Repeat that sentence with me. That works for me. Now imagine another situation. A coworker says, can we finish the meeting tomorrow instead? You reply, sure, that works for me. This phrase sounds natural and cooperative in conversations. Another very natural English phrase is, let me check. People say this when they need to look at something or confirm information before answering. For example, imagine someone asks you about your schedule. Instead of guessing, you say, let me check. Let's repeat that phrase. Let me check. Now imagine someone asks you, are you free tomorrow evening? You answer, let me check my calendar. Try repeating that full sentence slowly. Let me check my calendar. This phrase is extremely useful in everyday life. Another phrase people frequently use is, I totally agree. This phrase shows strong agreement with someone's opinion. For example, imagine someone says, Exercise is very important for staying healthy. You might answer, I totally agree. Let's repeat that phrase together. I totally agree. Now imagine another situation. A friend says, spending time with family is very important. You respond, I totally agree. Family time matters a lot. This phrase helps you express agreement clearly. Now let's practice a longer conversation exercise together. Imagine you are talking with a coworker about weekend plans. Your coworker says, I think we should relax more during the weekend instead of working. You respond, I totally agree. Then the coworker says, maybe we could go hiking on Saturday. You answer, that works for me. The coworker asks, are you free in the morning? You reply, let me check my schedule. Now pause and imagine saying these sentences naturally in a real conversation. The more you practice imagining real-life situations, the easier it becomes to speak English fluently. Another phrase you will hear very often is, I'm not sure. This phrase is useful when you do not know the answer to something. For example, imagine someone asks you, do you know what time the store closes? You might answer, I'm not sure. Repeat that phrase with me, I'm not sure. Now imagine another situation. Someone asks you, will it rain tomorrow? You respond, I'm not sure. Maybe we should check the weather forecast. This phrase helps you answer questions honestly and naturally. Another phrase that is very useful is, that's a great idea. People use this phrase when they like someone's suggestion. For example, imagine a friend says, let's cook dinner together tonight. You might respond, that's a great idea. Let's repeat that phrase together. That's a great idea. Now imagine another situation. Someone says, maybe we should start studying earlier this week. You respond, that's a great idea. Using this phrase encourages positive conversations. Another phrase commonly used in daily life is, I appreciate it. This phrase expresses gratitude in a warm and sincere way. For example, imagine someone helps you carry a heavy bag. You might say, I appreciate it. Repeat that phrase slowly. I appreciate it. Now imagine another situation. A coworker helps you finish an important task. You say, thanks for helping me today. I really appreciate it. This phrase sounds very polite and natural in English conversations. Now let's practice another short conversation scenario. Imagine your friend helps you solve a small problem. You say, thanks for your help. I really appreciate it. Your friend answers, no worries. Then you say, that's a great idea. Maybe we should try it again next time. Practicing conversations like this helps you build natural speaking habits. Another phrase that is often used in everyday English is take your time. People say this when they want someone to relax and not feel rushed. For example, imagine someone is trying to make a decision. You might say, take your time. Repeat that phrase slowly. Take your time. Now imagine another situation. A friend is looking through a menu in a restaurant and feels pressured to order quickly. You can say, take your time. This phrase makes conversations feel more comfortable and friendly. Another helpful phrase is, I get it. This phrase means that you understand something clearly. It is very similar to saying, I understand. For example, imagine someone explains a difficult idea to you. After listening carefully, you say, I get it. Repeat that phrase with me. I get it. Now imagine another situation. Someone explains how to use a new phone app. After listening, you respond, oh, I get it now. This phrase sounds very natural in modern conversations. Let's do another speaking exercise together. Imagine a friend is explaining how to cook a new recipe. At first, you feel confused. Then your friend explains the steps again. Finally, you say, "Oh, I get it now." Repeat that sentence slowly. "Oh, I get it now." Practicing this kind of response prepares you for real learning situations in English. Before we continue, let's review several phrases we practiced in this part of the lesson. Try repeating them slowly and clearly. It depends. I see what you mean. To be honest. That's interesting. I'm just kidding. That works for me. Let me check. I totally agree. I'm not sure. That's a great idea. I appreciate it. Take your time. I get it. Repeating phrases like this helps move them from memory into active speaking ability. Now imagine your next English conversation with a friend, coworker, or classmate. Picture yourself using one or two of these phrases naturally during that conversation. Maybe you will say, "But that's interesting," or "I totally agree," or "Let me check." The goal is not to memorize everything perfectly, but to slowly become comfortable using English phrases naturally in your daily life. Let's continue exploring more useful phrases that you can use in daily life conversations. These expressions are simple, natural, and very common in English. When you practice them regularly, you begin to sound more relaxed and confident when speaking. Remember to repeat the sentences after me whenever you can, and imagine real situations where you might use them. Another phrase that people use very often is, "That sounds great." This phrase is used when someone tells you about a plan or idea that you really like. For example, imagine a friend says, "We're going to have a small picnic in the park this weekend." You might respond, "That sounds great." It shows excitement and interest. Let's practice that phrase together. That sounds great. Now imagine another situation. Someone says, "We're planning to watch a movie tonight." You answer, "That sounds great. I'd love to join." Try repeating that sentence slowly. That sounds great. I'd love to join. Another common phrase in daily conversations is, "I'll take care of it." People say this when they want to show responsibility and let others know they will handle something. For example, imagine someone says, "We need to send this email before the meeting." You might respond, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." Repeat that sentence with me. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. This phrase is very helpful in both work and personal conversations because it shows confidence and reliability. Another useful phrase is, "That reminds me." People use this phrase when something in the conversation suddenly makes them remember something else. For example, imagine a friend talking about traveling. You might suddenly remember a story and say, "That reminds me, I forgot to tell you about my trip last month." Let's practice the phrase, "That reminds me." Now try saying the full sentence. "That reminds me, I wanted to ask you something." This phrase is very natural and helps connect ideas during conversations. Another phrase you will hear frequently is, "I'm looking forward to it." People use this phrase when they feel excited about something that will happen in the future. For example, imagine a friend invites you to a birthday party. You might say, "Thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it." Repeat that phrase slowly. I'm looking forward to it. Now imagine another situation. Someone says, We're going to start a new project next week. You reply, I'm looking forward to it. Using this phrase shows positive energy and enthusiasm. Now let's pause for a short speaking exercise. Imagine your friend invites you to a small dinner gathering. Your friend says, "We're having dinner together this Friday evening." You respond, "That sounds great. I'm looking forward to it." Now repeat that response slowly in your own voice. That sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. Practicing like this helps you build natural speaking habits. Another phrase that is very common in English conversations is no problem. This phrase is similar to saying no worries. People use it when responding to thanks or when telling someone that something is not difficult. And for example, imagine someone thanks you for helping them with something. You might respond, "No problem." Repeat that phrase with me, "No problem." Now imagine someone says, "Thank you for explaining that." You answer, "No problem. Happy to help." This phrase sounds very friendly and natural. Another phrase people often use is, "That's true." This phrase is used when you agree that something someone said is correct. For example, imagine someone says, "Learning a language takes time." You might respond, "That's true." Let's repeat the phrase together. That's true. Now imagine another situation. Someone says, "Practice is the key to improving English." You answer, "Yes, that's true." This phrase helps you participate actively in conversations. Another helpful phrase for daily conversations is, "I'm glad you said that." People use this phrase when someone mentions something important or helpful. For example, imagine a friend reminds you about an upcoming event. You might say, "I'm glad you said that. I almost forgot." Repeat that sentence slowly. I'm glad you said that. This phrase shows appreciation and attention during conversations. Another phrase that sounds very natural in English conversations is, "I was about to say that." People use this phrase when someone says something that they were also thinking. For example, imagine two friends discussing a restaurant. One friend says, "The food there is really good." The other friend responds, "I was about to say that." Repeat the phrase with me. I was about to say that. This phrase helps create a feeling of connection during conversations. Let's practice a short conversation scenario together. Imagine you and your friend are discussing a weekend plan. Your friend says, "We should visit the new cafe downtown." You respond, "That sounds great." Your friend continues, "I heard the coffee there is excellent." You say, "I was about to say that. I heard the same thing." Now imagine yourself speaking this conversation naturally. Another phrase that is very useful in daily life is, "It's up to you." People say this when they want another person to make the decision. For example, imagine a friend asks, "Should we watch a movie or go for a walk?" You might respond, "It's up to you." Let's repeat the phrase together. It's up to you. Now imagine another situation. Someone asks, "What time should we meet tomorrow?" You answer, "It's up to you. Whatever works best." This phrase sounds relaxed and friendly. Another phrase that people often use is "let's see." People say this when they are thinking or trying to decide something. For example, imagine someone asks you about your plans for the evening. You might say, "Let's see. I might go to the gym later." Repeat that phrase slowly. Let's see. Now imagine another situation. Someone asks, "What should we do next?" You answer, "Let's see. Maybe we could take a walk." This phrase is very common in natural speech. Another phrase that is extremely common in everyday English is, "That's a good question." People use this phrase when someone asks something interesting or difficult. For example, imagine someone asks you, Why do you enjoy learning English?" You might respond, "That's a good question." Repeat that phrase slowly. "That's a good question." Now imagine answering the question after saying that phrase. "That's a good question. I enjoy learning English because it helps me communicate with people around the world." Another useful phrase you will hear often is, "It happens." People say this when something small goes wrong and they want to show understanding. For example, imagine someone apologizes for forgetting something. You might respond, "It happens." Repeat the phrase slowly. "It happens." This phrase shows kindness and understanding in conversations. Now let's do another practice exercise together. Imagine your friend arrives late and says, "Sorry I'm late, I missed the bus." You respond, "It happens. Don't worry about it." Now repeat that sentence slowly. "It happens. Don't worry about it." This kind of supportive response makes conversations more friendly and comfortable. Another phrase people frequently use is, "I'm just saying." This phrase is used when someone wants to share an opinion without sounding too strong or argumentative. For example, imagine someone suggests leaving later for an event. You might say, "We might want to leave earlier because of traffic." I'm just saying. Repeat that phrase slowly. I'm just saying. This phrase helps soften your opinion in conversations. Another phrase that sounds very natural in daily English is "at least." People use this phrase to focus on the positive side of a situation. For example, imagine it starts raining during a trip. Someone might say, "Well, at least the weather is cooler now." Repeat the phrase with me. At least. Now imagine another situation. Someone says, "The meeting was long, but at least we finished the project." This phrase helps express optimism. Let's practice another conversation example together. Imagine you are talking with a friend after a long day. Your friend says, "Today was very busy." You respond, "That's true." Your friend continues, "But at least we finished our work." You say, "Yes, that's a good point." Now pause for a moment and imagine saying those sentences in a natural conversation. Before we move on, let's review several phrases we practiced in this part of the lesson. Try repeating them slowly and clearly. "That sounds great. I'll take care of it. That reminds me. I'm looking forward to it. No problem. That's true. I'm glad you said that. I was about to say that. It's up to you. Let's see. That's a good question. It happens. I'm just saying. At least." Repeating these phrases regularly will help them become part of your natural English speaking ability. Now imagine your next real conversation in English. Maybe you are talking with a friend, a classmate, or a coworker. During that conversation, try using one or two of the phrases we practiced today. Maybe you will say, "That sounds great," or "Let's see," or "That's a good question." When you begin using these phrases naturally in real situations, you will start feeling much more confident speaking English. Let's continue with more natural English phrases that people use in everyday conversations. These expressions will help you sound more comfortable and fluent when speaking English with friends, co-workers, or people you meet during daily life. Remember to repeat the sentences out loud and imagine real situations where you could use them. Another very common phrase people use is, I can't complain. This phrase is often used as an answer when someone asks how you are doing. It means things are going okay in your life. Maybe everything is not perfect, but overall things are fine. For example, imagine a friend asks you, how's your day going? You might respond, pretty good. I can't complain. Let's practice saying that phrase slowly. I can't complain. Now imagine another situation. Someone asks you how work is going. You could answer, it's going well. I can't complain. This phrase is very common in friendly conversations. Another phrase people often say is, that's the plan. This phrase means that something is your intention or your goal. For example, imagine someone asks you if you are going to finish a project today. You might answer, yes, that's the plan. Repeat that phrase with me. That's the plan. Now imagine another situation. Someone asks you, are you going to start exercising every morning? You answer, yes, that's the plan. This phrase sounds confident and natural. Another useful phrase in daily conversations is, we'll see. People use this phrase when they are not completely sure about something in the future. For example, imagine a friend asks, will the weather be good tomorrow? You might respond, we'll see. Let's repeat that phrase slowly. We'll see. Now imagine another situation. Someone asks, do you think the team will win the game? You answer, we'll see. This phrase is short but very natural in everyday English. Another phrase that sounds very natural in conversations is, I didn't realize that. People say this when they learn something new that they did not know before. For example, imagine someone tells you that a restaurant has been open for many years. You might respond, oh, I didn't realize that. Repeat the phrase slowly. I didn't realize that. Now imagine another situation. A friend tells you they started learning English several years ago. You answer, really? I didn't realize that. This phrase shows interest and curiosity. Let's pause for a short practice moment. Imagine you are talking with a friend about a city you both visited. Your friend says, that city has one of the oldest universities in the country. You respond, oh, I didn't realize that. Now repeat that response slowly in your own voice. Oh, I didn't realize that. These small reactions make conversations more natural. Another phrase you will hear very often is, that makes a lot of sense. This phrase is similar to that makes sense, but it shows stronger agreement or understanding. For example, imagine someone explains why they prefer studying at night. After listening, you might respond, that makes a lot of sense. Let's repeat that phrase together. That makes a lot of sense. Now imagine another situation. Someone explains why they chose a certain job. You reply, that makes a lot of sense. This phrase helps show that you are listening carefully. Another phrase people use frequently is, I'll keep that in mind. This phrase means you will remember a suggestion or piece of advice for the future. For example, imagine someone gives you advice about learning English. You might say, thanks for the advice. I'll keep that in mind. Repeat the sentence slowly. I'll keep that in mind. Now imagine another situation. A coworker tells you about a useful tool for work. You respond, I'll keep that in mind. This phrase sounds polite and thoughtful. Another phrase that is very helpful in daily conversations is, that's good to know. People use this phrase when they receive useful information. For example, imagine someone tells you that a store opens earlier than you expected. You might respond, that's good to know. Let's practice saying that phrase together. Hey, that's good to know. Now imagine another situation. A friend tells you that a new cafe has excellent coffee. You reply, that's good to know. Maybe I'll visit it sometime. Another phrase people use a lot is it's worth it. People say this when something requires effort or cost, but gives good results. For example, imagine someone says, learning English takes time. You might respond, yes, but it's worth it. Repeat that phrase slowly. It's worth it. Now imagine another situation. Someone tells you they spent many hours studying for an exam. You respond, it must have been difficult, but it's worth it. This phrase expresses encouragement and motivation. Now let's practice a short conversation together. Imagine you are talking with a friend about learning English. Your friend says, studying every day can be tiring. You respond, yes, that's true. Your friend continues, but improving your skills is very rewarding. You reply, yes, it's worth it. Now repeat those sentences slowly and imagine the conversation happening naturally. Another phrase that people often use in everyday conversations is, I'm not used to it. People say this when something feels unfamiliar. For example, imagine someone moves to a new city and the weather is very different. They might say, I'm not used to this weather. Let's repeat that phrase slowly. I'm not used to it. Now imagine another situation. Someone tries waking up very early for the first time. They might say, I'm not used to waking up this early. This phrase is useful when talking about new experiences. Another phrase that sounds very natural in English is, that's understandable. People use this phrase when they recognize that someone's feelings or actions make sense. For example, imagine someone says they are tired after working all day. You might respond, that's understandable. Repeat that phrase slowly. That's understandable. This phrase shows empathy and kindness. Another phrase you will hear frequently is, it's not a big deal. People say this when they want to make something seem less serious or less important. For example, imagine someone apologizes for making a small mistake. You might respond, it's not a big deal. Repeat that phrase slowly. It's not a big deal. This phrase helps keep conversations relaxed and friendly. And another phrase that people often use is, let's figure it out. People say this when they want to solve a problem together. For example, imagine you and a friend are planning a trip but cannot decide on the best date. You might say, let's figure it out. Repeat the phrase slowly. Let's figure it out. This phrase shows teamwork and cooperation. Now let's practice another short conversation scenario. Imagine you are planning an event with a friend. Your friend says, I'm not sure what time we should start. You respond, let's figure it out. Your friend suggests a few options. You say, that makes a lot of sense. Practicing conversations like this helps your brain become more comfortable using English naturally. And another phrase that sounds very natural in daily life is, that's exactly what I meant. People use this phrase when someone understands their idea correctly. For example, imagine you explain something and your friend repeats the idea in their own words. You might say, yes, that's exactly what I meant. Repeat that phrase slowly. That's exactly what I meant. This phrase confirms understanding in conversations. Another useful phrase is, I couldn't agree more. This phrase shows very strong agreement with someone's opinion. For example, imagine someone says, practice is the best way to improve English. You might respond, I couldn't agree more. Let's repeat that phrase together. I couldn't agree more. This phrase sounds natural and expressive. Before we continue, let's review some of the phrases we practiced in this part of the lesson. Try repeating them slowly and clearly. I can't complain. That's the plan. We'll see. I didn't realize that. That makes a lot of sense. I'll keep that in mind. That's good to know. It's worth it. I'm not used to it. That's understandable. It's not a big deal. Let's figure it out. That's exactly what I meant. I couldn't agree more. Practicing these phrases regularly will help you use them naturally in real conversations. Now imagine yourself tomorrow speaking English with someone. Maybe you are talking with a friend, a coworker, or someone you just met. Try using one of these phrases naturally. Maybe you will say, "That's good to know," or "It's worth it," or "I couldn't agree more." When you begin using these phrases naturally in real situations, your confidence and fluency will grow step by step. Let's continue learning more natural phrases that people use in everyday English conversations. The goal of this lesson is not just to learn the phrases, but to become comfortable using them in real situations. When you repeat the sentences and imagine real conversations, your brain begins to connect the language with real life. This is one of the most effective ways to build fluency. Another phrase people use very often is, "That's what I was thinking." This phrase is used when someone says something that you were also thinking about. It shows agreement and shared understanding. For example, imagine you and a friend are discussing where to eat. Your friend says, "Maybe we should try that new restaurant." You might respond, "That's what I was thinking." Let's practice that phrase together. That's what I was thinking. Now imagine another situation. Someone suggests leaving early to avoid traffic. You respond, "Yes, that's what I was thinking." This phrase helps create a feeling of connection during conversations. Another phrase you will hear very frequently is, "I guess so." People use this phrase when they agree with something but not very strongly. It means you think something is probably true. For example, imagine someone says, "It looks like it might rain later." You might answer, "I guess so." Let's repeat the phrase slowly. I guess so. Now imagine another situation. Someone asks, "Do you think the meeting will be long?" You answer, "I guess so. There's a lot to discuss." This phrase is very common in relaxed conversations. Another useful phrase is, "That works." This phrase is similar to, "That works for me," but shorter and more casual. People say it when they agree with the suggestion. For example, imagine someone says, "Let's meet at 3 o'clock." You respond, "That works." Repeat that phrase with me. That works. Now imagine another situation. Someone suggests finishing a task tomorrow instead of today. You answer, "That works." This phrase is very simple but extremely useful. Another phrase that sounds very natural in daily English is, "Give it a try." People use this phrase when encouraging someone to try something new. For example, imagine a friend is unsure about trying a new activity. You might say, "Just give it a try." Let's repeat that phrase slowly. Give it a try. Now imagine another situation. Someone is nervous about speaking English. You might encourage them by saying, "Don't worry, just give it a try." This phrase is very supportive and motivating. Let's pause for a practice exercise. Imagine your friend is thinking about learning a new hobby, but feels unsure. Your friend says, "I don't know if I can do it." You respond, "You should give it a try." Repeat that sentence slowly in your own voice. You should give it a try. Practicing supportive responses like this makes your English conversations more natural. Another phrase that is very common is, "That's a relief." People say this when they feel happy that a difficult situation turned out better than expected. For example, imagine you were worried about an exam, and then you hear that you passed. You might say, "That's a relief." Repeat that phrase slowly. That's a relief. Now imagine another situation. Someone tells you that a delayed meeting has been canceled. You might respond, "That's a relief." This phrase expresses comfort and happiness. Another phrase people often use is, "I didn't think about that." This phrase is used when someone mentions an idea that you had not considered before. For example, imagine someone suggests leaving earlier for a trip to avoid traffic. You might respond, "I didn't think about that." Let's repeat that phrase together. I didn't think about that. This phrase shows that you are open to new ideas. Another phrase that is very natural in conversations is, "That's the idea." People use this phrase when confirming that something matches their intention or plan. For example, imagine someone explains your idea to another person correctly. You might say, "Yes, that's the idea." Repeat the phrase slowly. That's the idea. This phrase helps confirm understanding. Another phrase that people use often in daily conversations is, "I'll give it a shot." This phrase means you will try to do something, even if you are not sure you will succeed. For example, imagine someone asks you to fix a small problem with a computer. You might say, "I'll give it a shot." Repeat the phrase slowly. I'll give it a shot. Now imagine another situation. Someone asks you to cook a new recipe. You respond, "I've never done it before, but I'll give it a shot." This phrase shows willingness to try. Now let's practice a short conversation scenario together. Imagine you and a friend are discussing a new project. Your friend says, "This task might be a little difficult." You respond, "I'll give it a shot." Your friend says, "That's the idea. We just need to try." Now imagine speaking those sentences naturally. Another phrase that sounds very natural in daily English is, "It's hard to say." People use this phrase when they are unsure about an answer. For example, imagine someone asks you how long something will take. You might say, "It's hard to say." Let's repeat that phrase together. It's hard to say. Now imagine another situation. Someone asks you whether a team will win a game. You respond, "It's hard to say." This phrase shows uncertainty in a polite way. Another phrase people often use is, "I see your point." This phrase is used when you understand someone's opinion or perspective. For example, imagine someone explains why they prefer working from home. And after listening, you might say, "I see your point." Repeat the phrase slowly. I see your point. This phrase helps conversations remain respectful even if people have different opinions. Another phrase that is very common in everyday conversations is, "fair enough." People say this when they accept another person's explanation or opinion. For example, imagine someone tells you they cannot join an event because they are busy. You might respond, "Fair enough." Let's repeat that phrase slowly. Fair enough. This phrase sounds very natural in casual conversations. Another phrase that is extremely common in English is, "That's the way it is." People use this phrase when they accept a situation that cannot easily be changed. For example, imagine someone says a project will take longer than expected. You might respond, "Well, that's the way it is." Repeat the phrase slowly. That's the way it is. This phrase expresses acceptance. Let's practice another short conversation exercise. Imagine you are talking with a coworker. Your coworker says, "This project will take longer than we thought." You respond, "That's the way it is." Your coworker adds, "At least we have enough time to finish it properly." You answer, "That's true." Practicing conversations like this prepares you for real-life situations. Another phrase people often use in daily conversations is, "That's all I needed." People say this when they receive the information or help they were looking for. For example, imagine someone explains something clearly to you. You might respond, "Great, that's all I needed." Repeat that phrase slowly. That's all I needed. This phrase sounds natural and appreciative. Another phrase that sounds very friendly in conversations is, "I'm happy to help." People say this when they want to offer assistance in a positive way. For example, imagine someone thanks you for helping them understand something. You might respond, "I'm happy to help." Repeat the phrase slowly. I'm happy to help. This phrase creates a warm and supportive tone. Before we continue, let's review several phrases we practiced in this part of the lesson. Try repeating them slowly and clearly. That's what I was thinking. I guess so. That works. Give it a try. That's a relief. I didn't think about that. That's the idea. I'll give it a shot. It's hard to say. I see your point. Fair enough. That's the way it is. That's all I needed. I'm happy to help. Repeating these phrases regularly will help them become part of your natural speaking ability. Now imagine your next English conversation. Maybe you are talking with a friend, a coworker, or a classmate. During that conversation, try using one of these phrases naturally. Maybe you will say, "Fair enough," or "Give it a try," or "I see your point." With practice, these phrases will start to come to your mind automatically when you speak. Let's continue learning more useful English phrases that appear frequently in daily life conversations. By now you may notice something important. These phrases are not complicated grammar structures. They are simple expressions that native speakers use naturally every day. When you learn and practice these phrases, your English begins to sound more natural and relaxed. As always, try to repeat the phrases out loud and imagine real situations where you might use them. Another phrase people often say in everyday conversations is, "Now that you mention it." People use this phrase when someone reminds them of something they had not thought about recently. For example, imagine a friend says, "Have you seen that new cafe downtown?" You might respond, "Now that you mention it, I think I saw it yesterday." Let's practice that phrase together. Now that you mention it. Try saying it slowly again. Be now that you mention it. This phrase helps conversations flow naturally when ideas connect with each other. Another phrase that is very common is, "That's a good way to look at it." People say this when someone offers a perspective that sounds thoughtful or positive. For example, imagine someone says, "Learning English takes time, but every small step counts." You might respond, "That's a good way to look at it." Repeat that phrase slowly. That's a good way to look at it. This phrase encourages thoughtful conversation and shows respect for someone's opinion. Another phrase that sounds very natural in daily English conversations is, "I'm not really sure." This phrase is similar to saying, "I'm not sure," but it sounds a little softer and more conversational. For example, imagine someone asks you if a store is open late at night. You might respond, "I'm not really sure." Let's repeat that phrase together. I'm not really sure. Now imagine another situation. Someone asks you whether a movie is good. You answer, "I'm not really sure. I haven't seen it yet." This phrase is very common in relaxed conversations. Another useful phrase is, "It's kind of like." People use this phrase when explaining something by comparing it to something similar. For example, imagine someone asks you what a new app does. You might say, "It's kind of like a digital notebook." Repeat that phrase slowly. It's kind of like. Now imagine another example. Someone asks you what learning English feels like at the beginning. You might say, "It's kind of like learning to ride a bicycle. At first it feels difficult, but it gets easier with practice." This phrase helps explain ideas clearly. But let's pause for a short speaking exercise. Imagine your friend asks you about a new hobby you started. Your friend says, "What is it like?" You answer, "It's kind of like learning a new language. It takes patience and practice." Repeat that sentence slowly in your own voice. It's kind of like learning a new language. Practicing explanations like this helps build fluency. Another phrase that people use very often is, "If you ask me." This phrase is used when someone wants to express their personal opinion. For example, imagine two friends are discussing the best time to exercise. One person might say, "If you ask me, morning exercise is the best." Let's repeat that phrase slowly. If you ask me. Now imagine another situation. Someone asks about the best way to improve English speaking. You respond, "If you ask me." Practicing every day is the most important thing. This phrase makes your opinion sound natural and conversational. Another phrase you will hear often is, "That's the point." People say this when explaining the main purpose of something. For example, imagine someone says, "Learning English takes a lot of effort." You might respond, "Yes, that's the point. Practice helps you improve." Repeat that phrase slowly. That's the point. This phrase is useful when explaining ideas. Another phrase that sounds very natural in conversations is, "That's a fair point." This phrase is similar to saying, "That's a good point," but it emphasizes that someone's argument or opinion is reasonable. For example, imagine someone says, "Traveling is expensive, but also very educational." You might respond, "That's a fair point." Repeat that phrase slowly. That's a fair point. This phrase helps keep conversations respectful and balanced. Another phrase that people often use is, "I suppose so." This phrase is similar to saying, "I guess so," and it means you agree, but maybe not very strongly. For example, imagine someone says, "This project might take longer than we thought." You might respond, "I suppose so." Let's repeat the phrase slowly. I suppose so. This phrase sounds very natural in thoughtful conversations. Now let's practice a short conversation scenario. Imagine you and your friend are discussing learning English. Your friend says, "It takes a lot of time to become fluent." You respond, "That's a fair point." Your friend continues, but practicing every day helps. You answer, yes, that's the point. Now imagine speaking those sentences naturally in a conversation. And another phrase that is very useful is, "That's interesting to hear." People say this when they learn something surprising or unusual. For example, imagine someone tells you they learned English by watching movies. You might respond, "That's interesting to hear." Repeat the phrase slowly. That's interesting to hear. This phrase shows curiosity and interest. Another phrase that appears very often in daily English is, "come to think of it." People use this phrase when they suddenly remember something related to the conversation. For example, imagine someone mentions a restaurant you visited before. You might say, "Come to think of it, I went there last year." Repeat the phrase slowly. Come to think of it. This phrase is very natural in storytelling. Another phrase people use frequently is, "it turns out." This phrase is used when the final result of something is surprising or different from what you expected. For example, imagine you thought a movie would be boring, but it was actually very good. You might say, "It turns out the movie was great." Let's repeat that phrase together. It turns out. This phrase is useful when sharing experiences. Another phrase that sounds very natural is, "That's something to think about." People use this phrase when someone shares an idea that requires reflection. For example, imagine someone says that practicing a language every day builds confidence. You might respond, "That's something to think about." Repeat that phrase slowly. That's something to think about. This phrase encourages deeper conversation. Now let's practice another short conversation exercise together. Imagine you and your friend are discussing learning habits. Your friend says, "Many people learn English by listening to podcasts every day." You respond, "That's interesting to hear." Your friend adds, "It turns out that listening practice improves pronunciation." You answer, "That's something to think about." Practicing conversations like this helps you use English phrases naturally. Another phrase that is very common in everyday English is, "I never thought about it that way." People say this when someone shares a perspective that changes their thinking. For example, imagine someone explains a new way to learn vocabulary. You might respond, "I never thought about it that way." Repeat that phrase slowly. "I never thought about it that way." This phrase shows openness to new ideas. Another phrase people often say is, "That explains it." This phrase is used when something suddenly makes sense. For example, imagine someone explains why they were late because of heavy traffic. You might respond, "That explains it." Repeat the phrase slowly. That explains it. This phrase is very common in daily conversations. Before we continue, let's review some of the phrases we practiced in this part of the lesson. Try repeating them slowly and clearly. Now that you mention it, that's a good way to look at it. "I'm not really sure." It's kind of like, "if you ask me." That's the point. That's a fair point. I suppose so. That's interesting to hear. Come to think of it, it turns out. That's something to think about. I never thought about it that way. That explains it. Repeating these phrases regularly will help you remember them more easily. Now imagine your next English conversation. Maybe you are talking with a friend about your day, your plans, or your experiences. During that conversation, try using one or two of these phrases naturally. Perhaps you will say, "come to think of it," or if you ask me, or that explains it. These small phrases can make a big difference in how natural your English sounds. Let's continue with the final part of our lesson and explore a few more phrases that can help you sound natural and confident during daily life conversations. By now, you have heard many useful expressions that people use in everyday English. The key idea is not just to remember the phrases, but to practice them and imagine using them in real conversations. When you begin using them naturally, your speaking ability grows much faster. Another phrase that people use very often is, "That rings a bell." This phrase is used when something sounds familiar, but you are not completely sure why. For example, imagine someone mentions the name of a restaurant you visited a long time ago. You might respond, "That rings a bell." Let's practice that phrase slowly. That rings a bell. Now imagine another situation, and someone mentions a movie you heard about before. You respond, "That rings a bell, but I don't remember the details." This phrase is very natural in casual conversations. Another useful phrase is, "That's good news." People say this when they hear positive information. For example, imagine a friend tells you they passed an important exam. You might respond, "That's good news." Repeat that phrase slowly. That's good news. Now imagine another situation. Someone says the meeting has been canceled. You might respond, "That's good news. Now we have more time." This phrase helps express happiness and encouragement. Another phrase people use frequently is, "That sounds about right." This phrase is used when something seems correct or reasonable. For example, imagine someone says a task might take 2 hours. You might respond, "That sounds about right." Let's repeat that phrase together. That sounds about right. This phrase is common when discussing plans, schedules, or estimates. Another natural phrase is, "I'll keep trying." People use this phrase when they want to show determination. For example, imagine someone asks if learning English is difficult. You might answer, "Sometimes it is difficult, but I'll keep trying." Repeat that sentence slowly. I'll keep trying. This phrase expresses persistence and motivation. Now let's pause for a small speaking exercise. Imagine a friend asks you about your progress in learning English. Your friend says, "Is learning English difficult for you?" You respond, "Sometimes it is challenging, but I'll keep trying." Now repeat that response slowly. Sometimes it is challenging, but I'll keep trying. Practicing sentences like this builds confidence in real conversations. Another phrase people often use in daily life is, "That's the best part." People say this when they want to highlight the most enjoyable part of something. For example, imagine someone asks why you like traveling. You might respond, "Meeting new people is the best part." Repeat the phrase slowly. That's the best part. This phrase helps express enthusiasm. Another phrase that sounds very natural is, "That reminds me of something." People use this phrase when they suddenly remember a related story or experience. For example, imagine someone talking about visiting a beach. You might say, "That reminds me of something. I once visited a beautiful beach during a vacation." Repeat the phrase slowly. That reminds me of something." This phrase helps conversations flow smoothly. Another phrase people use often is, "That's the main thing." People say this when they want to emphasize what is most important in a situation. For example, Imagine someone talks about learning English grammar perfectly. You might respond, being able to communicate is the main thing. Let's repeat that phrase slowly. That's the main thing. This phrase helps express priorities. Another phrase that is very common in conversations is, that's all that matters. People say this when something important is more valuable than everything else. For example, imagine someone worries about making small mistakes while speaking English. You might respond, if people understand you, that's all that matters. Repeat that sentence slowly. That's all that matters. This phrase encourages confidence. Now let's imagine another short conversation together. Your friend says, I sometimes make mistakes when I speak English. You respond, that's okay. If people understand you, that's all that matters. Your friend says, I guess you're right. You answer, yes, communication is the main thing. Now imagine saying those sentences naturally in a real conversation. Another phrase that people often use is, it's part of the process. This phrase means that something difficult is a normal step while learning or improving. For example, imagine someone feels frustrated while learning English. You might say, making mistakes is part of the process. Repeat the phrase slowly. It's part of the process. This phrase encourages patience and persistence. And another phrase that sounds very natural in everyday English is, that makes me think. People use this phrase when a conversation causes them to reflect or consider something new. For example, imagine someone explains a new idea about learning languages. You might respond, that makes me think about how I practice every day. Repeat the phrase slowly. That makes me think. This phrase is useful when sharing thoughts during conversations. Another phrase people often say is, that's a good reminder. This phrase is used when someone says something helpful that you needed to remember. For example, imagine someone reminds you to practice speaking English every day. You might respond, that's a good reminder. Repeat that phrase slowly. That's a good reminder. This phrase shows appreciation. Let's practice one final conversation example together. Imagine you are talking with a friend about improving English skills. Your friend says, practicing a little every day helps a lot. You respond, that's a good reminder. Your friend continues, learning a language takes patience. You answer, yes, it's part of the process. Practicing conversations like this helps you prepare for real-life communication. Now let's take a moment to review many of the phrases you practiced throughout this lesson. Try repeating several of them slowly in your own voice. How's it going? What's going on? Give me a second. I'm on my way. That makes sense. No worries. Sounds good. Let me check. That's a great idea. Take your time. That sounds great. I appreciate it. It depends, to be honest. That's interesting. I'm just kidding. That works for me. I totally agree. That's a good question. It happens. I can't complain. That's the plan. We'll see. That makes a lot of sense. That's good to know. It's worth it. That's understandable. Let's figure it out. I see your point. Fair enough. Give it a try. That's a relief. I'll give it a shot. It's hard to say. That's the way it is. Now that you mention it, come to think of it, that explains it. That rings a bell. That sounds about right. I'll keep trying. That's the best part. That's is all that matters. It's part of the process. These phrases appear very frequently in real conversations, and practicing them will help you sound more natural. The most important thing to remember is that language learning is a gradual journey. You do not need to master everything at once. Every time you practice speaking, listening, or repeating phrases, you are training your brain to communicate more easily in English. Even small daily practice can create big improvement over time. If you continue practicing these phrases in real conversations, you will begin to notice that speaking English becomes more comfortable and more natural. Try to challenge yourself to use a few of these phrases the next time you speak English. And maybe you will say, "That sounds great," or "Fair enough," or "That's good to know." When you start using phrases like these automatically, it means your English is becoming more fluent. Thank you for spending this time practicing English with me today. Keep practicing, stay curious, and keep speaking whenever you have the opportunity.